I'm Gene Gravlee, and I'd like to talk to you today about the Gravlee family history. For most people, they wait late in life until they begin a lot of the research that they do, but this was not the case for me because during high school and after high school, I wanted to know where I came from and who my ancestors were. I wanted to know who gave me that right to talk and live as an American like we do. I was born at place called Burton Bend, which is just outside Sipsey on May the 5th, 1940. I'm the oldest of 8 children, and two of my siblings are now deceased, one being Bobby, one being Nancy. And the others live, except for one, live in Alabama, one lives in North Carolina. Our parents were Walton Jackson Gravlee, and Daddy was born January the 7th in 1913. And he was born in a place called Burnwell in Walker County, for those of you that know where it is. Matter of fact, the old house he was born in was the house that Charlie and Carol and Yao grew up in. And that house has been standing a long time. I understand it's no longer there. Daddy died July the 2nd, 1980, in a place called Winchester, Tennessee, and he's buried up there in a cemetery between Winchester and Cowan. My mother was born April 21st, 1916, in a place called Benoit, which is also in Walker County, and for those of you that know where it is, you know that it lays between Dora and Cadova on the what we used to call the Dora-Cadova Highway. Mother died early. She died young in life. Mother died May the 19th, 1959, just a little over a year after I finished high school. And she's buried at Morgan Cemetery in Summerton. Now that's Morgan Cemetery. It's not the Baptist Church Cemetery. A lot of people get that confused, but it lays there between the Baptist Church and the Bell Funeral Home. My first memories of home life with my parents goes back probably to a place called Sandusky, because Sandusky is where I first entered school in the first grade in 1946. Went only 1 year over there, I believe, maybe a year and a half, and then from there we moved in different places, and I do not remember the exact time frame which it was done, but we lived in Sipsey, or outside Sipsey, between Sipsey and Lynn's Park, on the old Sheely place. Then we lived in Burnwell, and a house up there on the hill, and that house I think that house is no longer standing. It was till here a while back, and there I attended Burnwell School, which was an old 3-room schoolhouse over there. You had the 1st and 2nd grade together, 3rd and the 4th grade together, and the 5th and the 6th. And if I remember right, one of the teachers was Ms. Alexander, and I think Mr. Pruden even taught over there at that time. But those are some of the places I remember that we lived up until about 1949, when no jobs were available in Walker County and Birmingham. No jobs were available anywhere. It didn't seem like. But Daddy found a job in Fort Wayne, Indiana, and so we moved there, and I went to school there in Fort Wayne until my sophomore year. Every summer I was coming back down here to spend the summer with either my granddaddy, and then after he died, with my uncle Horace Roberts, which that place was located down on the Flat Creek Road. Then in 1955, I was given the opportunity to stay and go to school and finish my last 3 years at Dora, and I took it, and my parents allowed me to do that. My parents later moved when I was in the last part of my senior year. They moved back from Indiana and moved into Summerton, and Daddy started working again in Birmingham. But that job soon played out, and he moved again down to the Mississippi coast and got a job down with Ingalls Shipyard. And he worked down there for some while, and that job played out, and then he went to Tullahoma, Tennessee, and moved up there, and that's where my daddy died. But like I said, my mother, when she came back, she died in 1959. My father's father was George Strother Gravlee, and he was born after the war between the states, and he first married Lillian York. They had 3 children, and not too long after the 3rd child was born, she died. And then a little bit later on, he began courting my grandmother, who was Ida Elizabeth Sellers, down in the Bethel community just across from Jefferson County. She was the daughter of John Walton Sellers and Mizanai Ellen Wilson. They soon were married, and they had several children, which my father was one of them. But his brothers and sisters, they were all a close family, and most of the time they lived in Walker County. They lived at a place called Gravleeton, which is located up near the Coleman County line on Rice Chapel Road, or what they call Campbellsville Road. Lived in Autauga County, down near the Chilton-Autauga County line, in a place called Marbury. Is where 2 children were stillborn there, and they are buried there at where the old remnants of an old Baptist church is. My grandfather was a Baptist minister, and he was a notary, and so my grandmother, she became a notary also at the same time, where if he wasn't there at the house, if people came to have something notarized, she could do it for them. As a matter of fact, she was the notary on my wife's birth certificate. All the information there, and you can imagine when I looked at that the first time and found her name there. My great-grandfather is one of the people we're going to talk about now, him and my great-grandmother. He was Harvey Jackson Gravlee, and he was born in February of 1847, if you can imagine that. He was born here in Walker County. Actually, he was the first of my ancestors buried here. Well, he was the first on the Gravlee side that was buried, that was born here. And he married Nancy Ship, or Nancy Narcissus Gaines. Get that kind of confused because sometimes there gets to be too many Nancys, but my great-grandmother was Nancy Narcissus Gaines, and she was from Corona, down off of where Alabama 18 is now, and that lays between Oatman and Berry. But first, my great-granddaddy, Harvey Jackson Gravlee, who they called Jack, Jack enlisted in the war between the states late in the war, and he was in the 28th Alabama, and he was there and through the last part of the war, along with several of his brothers. He had one brother, Jesse Lafayette Gravlee, who was on Bragg's retreat from the north, and he was shot all to pieces in that, and they loaded him up on the train, and they shipped him to Montgomery, where he had several limbs amputated, and he had a most excruciating pain until his death. And he was brought back on the train over to Warrior, where my great-granddaddy picked the body up and brought that body and buried it up at Rice's Chapel Cemetery. And there for several years, the old stone was in pretty good shape, and then it just deteriorated away, and I was managed to procure a government marker, and you can find that government marker up there today designating where his grave is. Now, my great-granddaddy had George Washington Gravlee, who was also a Confederate soldier. He was a lieutenant, and another brother was there, John David Gravlee. So the only one left to stay around here was put at a mill to operate a mill during the war between the states. But my great-granddaddy made it through. All of them did except Jesse Lafayette. And then when my great-granddaddy married my great-grandmother, they had several children. He lived to be 80 years of age and died in the early 1930s. And my great-grandmother lived to be nearly 100. Matter of fact, she was 92, and I was at her funeral in 1950. My great-great-grandparents were William Lafayette Gravlee, born in 1810, and his wife was Martha Cara, C-A-R-A, Fowler, and she was born in 1812. My great-great-grandmother, Martha Gravlee, was the daughter of John Fowler and his wife, Lucy Whitaker Fowler, and they're buried at Mount Tabor Cemetery in Blount County. My great-great-granddaddy, or second great-grandfather, William Gravlee, was born probably in Ray County, Tennessee, is the information that we have. Now, his parents were Laban Gravlee and his wife, Mary Polly Bly, and that spelling of that last name is B-L-Y-T-H-E. Her father was William Bly, and her mother was Sarah Murphy, M-U-R-P-H-R-E-E. They were married in Ray County, Tennessee. However, she had grown up in another area of North Carolina or South Carolina, and he had also grown up in Pickens County, South Carolina. William and Polly had moved to Ray County, Tennessee, where they were raising their family, where they had 2 sons, John and William, and 2 daughters. And Laban died there early in around 1813. And then Mary, his mother, had remarried and married a Thomas Drennan. And in the spring of 1819, she set out with several other people coming down the Tennessee River. Now, those other people were, it's recorded as Drennan family. However, she is the Drennan in there, and Thomas does not come down to Alabama with them from Ray County, Tennessee. They're riding in boats that are floating in the middle of Tennessee River. These boats were built by a Burns guy who later settled in Blount County along with his father, who was a Revolutionary War soldier. These boats were big enough, and this is what I thought, this is really neat, that they were traveling in the middle of the Tennessee River to stay off the banks of the north or the south side of the river to avoid outlaws on one side and Indians on the other for their trip down the river to where they landed at a place called Gunner's Landing, which is now Gunnersville. Now from there, we've got a little bit of leeway here, but what I do know is that on April the 20th, 1820, Mary brings her children and settles on the banks of the Mulberry River, which is on the edge of what is now Coleman County. But at that time, it was all in Walker County. Even Walker County stretched across on the other side of Arkadelphia. but we do know that, and that's where she brought her family and raised them up. And my great-great-granddaddy later lived up there at where the Gravlee Junction Road goes down into Myers Bottom. He lived on one side of the road, and I had another ancestor, a William Busby, B-U-Z-B-E-E, that lived on the north side. During William Gravlee's lifetime, the man made several accomplishments. He built one of the first schools in Walker County, which would be located up in what today is Rice's Bottom. Not only that, but he went to school with his children so that he would not be illiterate. Now he is the person who changed the spelling of the name from Gravely to Gravlee. If you see a person spells the last name the same as we do, they descend from one of two men, one of them being John Gravlee and the other one being William Gravlee, my great-great-grandfather. Now, several times throughout his career, he did something outstanding, and if you check the history books, you'll see it because it's recorded there. He is one of the people who started the mining of coal in Walker County off the banks of the Warrior River and out of the banks of there, and even had a fleet of barges who shipped the coal all the way to Mobile. And not only that, those barges took vegetables and everything else. So he was a trader, a farmer, and then during the war between the states, he was a member of the Alabama legislature representing Walker County. Laban Gravlee was the son of John Gravlee and Margaret Peggy Ballinger. Peggy's father was Joseph Ballinger, and he was a patriot during the American Revolution. And her mother was Sarah Franklin, and they were from Virginia. John was also raised in Virginia, in Henry and Patrick County. He had a brother, Joseph Gravlee, who was a soldier during the American Revolution, and Joseph has a Daughters of the American Revolution chapter named after him in Virginia. But they being Margaret and John, they stayed there in Henry and Patrick County until they decided to make the trek down to Pickens County, South Carolina, where they loaded up everything they had, all their possessions, as was common back then, and they made that trek down into Pickens County, South Carolina. Now, I have been up there and been about the same route that wagon would have had to travel. And let me tell you something, it would be something even today to make that trip in a wagon and to be hard-nosed and everything like they were. It's just amazing. But then they came down to Pickens County and they lived out their lives there. There is a Gravlee family cemetery, which I have been to and been inside, and we believe we have found the graves of our fifth-grade ancestors there. But not for sure, because you can never tell what was put in the ground in those days. John Gravlee was my fourth great-grandfather on the Gravlee side. And his father, my fifth great, was the best that we can nearly prove, can hardly prove it, is James Gravlee. We believe that he is him, but there is a broken line between him that runs to England. Now, I have been to England and have done the research, and I have found what was told to us through the years as part of our history, and I have even found a knight that was buried in a church floor in Watnet Stone. Now, Watnet Stone is in near Hartford, England, and it's the old church is out there by itself, and there's a graveyard there. And when my son Mike and I arrived there, the church was locked up, and so we went out into the cemetery itself. And as we were coming back, this car drove up, and it just happened to be, I believe they call them rector, R-E-C-T-O-R. I believe that's what they call them. But the minister drove up, and we asked for permission to go inside. And I had the information of where this particular grave was and had found it in the libraries there in England. They call those county halls. And went there, and he allowed us to go inside. And when I followed the directions to this one certain place, I discovered that there was a large area rug. On top of this large, it was a blue rug, as a matter of fact. On top of this large area blue rug was two set of pipe racks made out of pipe to hold up the choir robes. And of course, Mike said, let's just move everything. And I said, let's get permission. We're in a strange country. We're in another country. We're not in the United States. And we did. We obtained permission. And when I threw the cover of that rug back, there was the grave of Robert D. Gravlee. And it had his birth and death dates on it, in which I have a copy today. And it just made all of us. The minister told us afterwards, he said, there's going to be another disappointed American tourist here. But we were not disappointed. We found that grave, and then we went to a place called Gravlee, not too far from there, where our ancestors are supposed to have come across from Normandy. And there's we're not sure of who he is, but there's an unknown grave in the church there at Gravlee. And you just have to be there and see what we saw and feel it to know exactly what I'm talking about. But maybe you should be interested. Maybe you need to get involved and find out who your ancestors were.